Okay, welcome to the JoeDock Hour. I am your host, JoeDock. This is episode number 1, and with us today we have composer, teacher, music, knower of all genres, very cool man. We have Ulrich in the house. Could we get an applause for Ulrich?
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, I think I just want to get to know right off the bat, what are you working on these days?
Actually, as always, a few things parallel, but yeah, mostly on two things. Actually, I'm finishing up a huge cycle of 9 pieces for saxophone solo, which I've been working on for many years. It's like a work in progress, like work on it, perform it, change it, work on it. And then I'm about to finish a big piece for like an amplified group in Switzerland. And that's gonna be interesting, like 10 amplified instruments, like very rock bass, but not like 2 guitars and electric bass, electronic drums, but then like 4 horns, a violin, a harp, an accordion.
Whoa, so kind of just like kind of like a Western art sort of rock band.
Kind of, yeah.
So that art pop. Yeah, no, because I'm very familiar. I was actually listening to some of your stuff before today. So I was listening to of course, the Metal Machine trio, and then I actually wrote down some of the pieces that I was listening to Raw Desert Center.
Oh yeah.
And then Bergmau performed by the Delirium Ensemble.
That's actually the piece I'm working on, because the version you heard was actually just a pre-version. So I'm continuing working on that piece, and it's a larger instrumentation, and it's gonna be more pieces. So that was kind of just a pre-concept performance.
Yeah, because it is. I think it was like an hour, a little more than an hour. Do you kind of see it expanding from there, or do you think that like taking what you have and just like changing the flow?
No, it's gonna be a little longer, probably more around 80 minutes. Sorry to say, but that was a good example how streaming does not work when you not have someone controlling it, because that piece has so big dynamic ranges that it's so loud, and then it gets quiet, and then I thought some of the quiet parts in the streaming were nearly inaudible, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, no, so like for the score of that one, how much of it is a notation and how much of it is just like audible instruction? Or
most of it is more or less somehow traditional notated, and then there are a few moments just with some verbal instruction.
Yeah, and especially because on the raw, it sounded like very soundscapey, kind of like the sound of almost like a desert, kind of just like setting a scene of something. I felt like
you just said raw reminded you of the desert. That there's 5 pieces altogether raw, and the subtitle is Desert Towns of Southern California.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
and each of the 5 pieces is actually named after one of those desert towns. They're all named for like some of those towns out there who like are not 100% abandoned. They're not yet ghost towns, but they're like 50, 60, 70% abandoned, and some people still live there. Maybe there's still a semi-functional gas station or something. So all those pieces are named after this type of Californian towns. Yeah, and I mean, I think raw is a good example. I mean, there's a lot of influence of noise and even metal and post-punk, but of course also a lot of art music in there, and the way this comes together. I think that's kind of, at the moment, really, that interests me the most.
Just like kind of fusing genres?
Exactly, fusing genres, but not in a way, more on an aesthetic level, I think if you fuse genres and the listener can just make out, oh, this is taken from classical, and this is taken from jazz, and this is taken from rock, I think then you're not really fusing it. Then you're just, I don't know, making a salad.
Yeah, making like a mosaic almost.
Yeah. Which might be working sometimes, but I'm really looking like what is really what these things have in common? And I often talk about it that for me as a teenager, I was listening, it was like still before punk, to a lot of the prog rock stuff, and then I discovered contemporary music like Stockhausen, and I did not know anything about that music. My family was not musical, and what interested me is that, wow, that soundscape is really cool. It's not so different from whatever Frank Zappa or Genesis or Yes or
Yeah.
So I did not start listening to that music as like high art. Yeah, I really kind of stumbled upon and said, wow, those are cool sounds. I like that stuff. What is that?
That's so interesting, and I feel like what gives you an edge too is that it's like you're playing the saxophone, which is like in rock and stuff. It would make sense to like because I study guitar, so obviously like feedback is so transparent. That's like automatically noise music. When I turn on like my like rat pedal, it just rings like crazy. But like to like incorporate saxophone, I feel like automatically, like just by the fact that there's a saxophone, there is the fusing of genres. That's one thing that I'm always impressed by. I think that like and that's difficult to actually do, is because a lot of people say like they're like fusing genres together, but like to actually fuse the genres, to see like what you can actually make of them. Because like when I think of just like a fusing a genre, like let me think, like some like rock progression over like a reggae beat or something, I'd be like, that's fusing, but it's really separate.
For a while, there was this term crossover was really big, especially actually used in the new music scene. So like pieces that would cross over art music writing with jazz or things like that. And I always made the comment that I think for a lot of those pieces, the term crossover is actually really appropriate, because you have a composer who knows one field really well, like classical contemporary music, yeah? And then they decide they want to bring in some jazz influence, but they actually know nothing about jazz, yeah? So they have a field they're really very familiar with, and they want to cross over to a field they know nothing about, yeah? And I always find that really dangerous, because you're coming from something you have studied for many, 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 many years, and suddenly you go into another field, and you just plunder without really studying it, yeah? And so that's why that crossover idea never appealed to me. For me, if you bring stuff together, and I think it's very appealing to bring stuff together, has to happen on like a deeper level, like, I mean, just a stupid example everyone knows: Frank Zappa starting to write in a art music style, but using guitars, and blues scales instead of like 12-tone scales, but really using techniques and things like that.
Wait, so do you think he was successful with that example, or do you think that he was like kind of like appropriating a certain genre to like
I think
writing
he
on the
was
surface?
not always successful, but there was definitely moments with Zappa where he really was successful, I think.
Like as like an artist, I want to learn about these like sort of different styles of music, and I want to incorporate them truly. So like what form of like education do you think is the way to educate yourself to like make that, like to be on the right road to make that? So like if I wanted to make like noise music or something without sounding like a total dork, like what is there like a certain like what is the process to like educate myself on that?
I mean, like anything. I mean, I think the first thing is just get started to listening to a lot of it. I mean, that's even what I say in class. Just live that music for a while to understand it. I think you just need to get a feel for its mechanism and what it really is about. So just really listening to a lot of it. And then, I mean, especially with noise, I mean, I did that with rock a lot. But, after listening, take one of the albums you really like, put it on, and play along with it. Just improvise along with it. You were talking about saxophone, and one of the things for me is, I mean, when I was like in my late teens and early 20s, I was playing jazz. I was playing bebop simply because I thought as a saxophone player that you have to do that. Yeah.
Totally.
And I did it for a few years, and I realized, it's actually not my thing. I mean, I'd like to listen to jazz, and especially to like 50s, 60s, 70s jazz, but I realized it's not what I'm into playing, and the whole like harmony stuff in jazz never really appealed to me until like cool jazz and the modal stuff. So continuing there from my background as being classical trained, which really I did that because I was so interested in all this contemporary techniques, multiphonics and four octaves and very quiet playing and all that stuff you don't normally get. But what I tried to do when I really started to play rock music again, I tried really to play rock saxophone. Because I think starting in the 80s, there was a tendency especially with David Bowie, to have jazz players play solos on rock pieces, which were clearly jazz solos on rock pieces. And, nothing wrong with it. What's the Bowie piece? Young American. I mean, a great saxophone solo, but it's a jazz solo, really. Yeah. It's not. But rock music has its own saxophone tradition, as we talked about, coming out of the 40s rhythm and blues, and it's a really strong tradition. Basically, all electric guitar players have learned from in the early 50s. They learned from those sax players. Yeah. And so I wanted to go back to make the saxophone a rock instrument. So, for example, I started playing Slayer riffs on a saxophone. I tried to play some death metal guitar solos on a saxophone. I mean, in a sense, kind of stupid stuff because it translates really badly from guitar to saxophone. It makes it really difficult to play. But in a sense, as just technique exercises, it was great. And as a training of aesthetics. Yeah. So I think that helped me to develop a new way to play rock saxophone.
Do you go to school for classical saxophone?
Yeah, I studied classical. I was a classical saxophone major at the University of the Arts in Berlin, and then later at the Manhattan School of Music in New York. And I kind of enjoyed it. I enjoyed the training, and of course, I very early, already in the first semester, started always to play contemporary pieces, and I had a teacher who was already into contemporary stuff, so that worked out all well. But then after a while, also having a classical saxophone piano duo playing early 20th century and late 19th century repertoire, someday I looked into my audience and said, who am I actually playing for? These are not my people. These are not the people I identify with and I want to perform for. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these people. It's like my thing. I don't think actually this is the audience I want to be in front of. So I stopped doing classical and I continued playing the contemporary avant-garde experimental stuff for many years, and then I stopped working with ensembles for the same reason. And for some years I only did solo, and then I said, it's still the same audience. They're just a little more progressive. They're a little bit more intellectual, but in the end, it's the same audience. Yeah. And so I stopped doing that and went really into rock music. And I realized, okay, these are my people, and this is my audience, and the way to work in a rock band. I mean, I was for a few years the saxophone player on call for the Berlin Philharmonics. Yeah. I recorded Webern with Pierre Boulez conducting. So I know that world, but I never felt comfortable in that world.
Yeah.
I'm actually still occasionally play other people's music and even record it, but I normally don't go on stage with it. Like maybe 2 years ago, I released a triple CD on the Belgium label with music by James Tenney and John Cage and Phil Niblock and some noise friends of mine who wrote pieces for me. And who else? Terry Riley and Steve Reich. Because I think this is really great music, and no one has released that music or not in the way I think it should be played and released. So I still like doing that, but for me that has become studio. I don't have a big urge to bring that music on the stage. For me, it's good if it's on the CD and it's documented, like the triple CD with Sub Rosa I just saw yesterday is sold out. Yeah. So I'm happy about that, and I'm happy I did that and spent the time. But I don't have the urge to bring that on stage.
How do you think that it should be performed, though? Because you did say that you have your like opinions on performing of like Cage and do you say Terry Riley and like all of those like composers? Like, how do you think that they should be like performed?
That's would be a really long discussion because we have to discuss different pieces individually. But basically, just to summarize it, I think a lot of classical and contemporary music needs more, sorry to be so stupid, oomph. You know, like
Yeah.
just these days, and check it out if you want. I was like showing someone Bartok's Fifth String Quartet, the first movement, which I think is a proto black metal piece. I mean, literally, all in unison. And really proto metal piece.
Mm-hmm.
If you played right, and I found one performance which sounds really good, and they really go for it. Yeah. But then when I was looking on YouTube to find the good performances, they were all lame. Yeah. So it's also the way you play it, yeah? And I think having an experience in rock music, you can actually play something like Stravinsky or Bartok better than someone who's just classical trained.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you have that oomph, you have that impact.
Yeah, you got to have more of an aggressive, raw nature to yourself.
And allow yourself to be not 100% perfect, you know. Sometimes, as we know, especially in rock music, it's not about having always the perfect intonation or having always the exact perfect timing, yeah. You can get away with stuff as long as your attitude is right.
Yeah. I always think that, you know, it really does not matter, you know, like, it's like I was playing a show the other night and like I was kind of like fucking some stuff up on stage. But the thing is that I was like, I got to keep my energy there. You know, like my energy has to be in there. As soon as, you know, I kind of go blank faced and I kind of just, you know, am just totally in my thoughts, you know. I'm just like the pieces, like everything's bad. Like, in which kind of I had this realization, like energy is everything in what you do. And which, you know, why I think that rock musicians have that is because that it relies on rock, which like, you know, exactly like if you're going to play like that heavy metal, like Bartok piece, like you got to be like you got to bring it, you know, you got to bring like that, like stuff that can't be taught.
Yeah. For just do a little detour here. That is actually a piece by Paul Hindemith, written even earlier, 17 or something like that. Yeah. It's for viola solo, and the fourth movement is an absolute death metal piece. I mean, absolute. You could just play it on a guitar, and you could say it's a Dayside piece. You really should listen. It's completely fucking crazy. He has a metronome marking of quarter equals 600. Yeah. And odd meters all over the thing. Yeah. If you don't play that with enough like energy, I was looking into, and then I'll come back to something else. In Berlin in the 1920s, there was a string quartet called, I think, the Busch Quartet. Yeah. And for example, they were famous to having her bows rehaired after each concert. Because they would play Beethoven in such a way that they would need new bow hairs after show, yeah?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that's kind of really going for it.
That is going for it. And that, honestly, you know, that's pretty punk.
Yeah.
You know, I will say that. Like, that is pretty cool. I mean, like, I feel like if you're not, like, you know, putting your back into classical music, you know, it's really, it lacks oomph. And especially because it needs oomph. You know, you're playing music from like 400 years ago. It's like I was playing like, do you know Fernando Sor?
No.
He's like a like guitarist, a Spanish guitarist, and like he wrote these etudes, but they're just so like, you know, like
I think there's
I was just like snoring while I was
for
playing
me
that.
there are two ways to play that material. Either you play it really historic, like some people do it, which is fantastic. So period instruments, period strings, period tuning, period intonation. You study all the books about period ornamentation and all of that. And those performances of Bach, Beethoven, Mozart are mostly fantastic, yeah? way better than modern orchestras. Either you do that, and they actually play with more oomph. They play Baroque music with much more accents and aggressiveness than a classical orchestra musician would do. Or the other way is, you ask yourself, why do I play this stuff in the 21st century? You know, why does it make sense to play here? So I have to do it in a way it makes sense. Yeah. I had this Polish composition teacher in Berlin. I did not officially study composition in Berlin, but unofficially studied with a composition teacher there.
Okay.
Witold Szalonek, great guy. I really loved him. Very open to all types of music. And he wrote this 35-minute long, very difficult saxophone solo piece. Yeah? 5 movements, which I, the only one who ever recorded it, even twice. And it's a fantastic piece. Yeah, and it goes from very quiet stuff to very aggressive stuff. And that's a good piece. Like, you know, the aggressive stuff, I really went for that in a rock way. And the quiet stuff, I all went for it with a risk that maybe notes even don't speak. Yeah, really, it really, I think, trying, like, give yourself the okay to be risky on stage. Yeah. So I remember one show where I played the piece, and Witold, the composer, came backstage and congratulated me. Oh, great concert. And I said, come on, don't be nice. You know, we're friends. That was a fuck up. I missed notes, you know, and things didn't really work the way I wanted. And it was not a good concert. And he looked at me and said, no. You played exactly my intention. You played my intention. It was fantastic. I don't care about the notes, you know?
Yeah.
You play the notes are just a guideline. And, you know, that really gave me to think. And that's from, like, you know, an established Polish composer. But no, he really liked it. And I missed notes because I went too aggressive. I went too fast, so I missed notes. But he actually liked that, you know?
Yeah.
He thought it's more portraying the piece than you trying to play all the notes.
Yeah, and that's real, you know, that's when you realize that, like, you know, I think that a big question is, like, well, yeah, why do I play this music in the 21st century, you know? And it really is, like, oh, to hit every single note. Like, you're really, like, missing out. Like, notes are just notes, but hitting exactly, like, getting lost in the music. It's hard to get lost in, like, classical, complex music because you're so, like, frustrated. So I feel like even, like, that's something that I would want too, you know? Like, I don't care if, like, I composed a piece and somebody was, like, playing whatever. If they were capturing an intent or, like, a mood, capturing, like, an expression, you know? Because, like, you can only compose so much to an extent where you're just, like, the performer has to, you know, bring it, like they have to have that, you know. And that's where I think that, like, especially like identity is kind of formed as an artist, you know, once you realize, like, energy behind just being, like, a trained dancing, like, I can play everything at all.
I mean, and personally, I mean, you know, I'm playing with a lot of people who actually, some of other friends of mine say, why are you playing with them? You know, they're like, can't hardly play the guitar. But they're some of my favorite. Lee Ronaldo, Sonic Youth. I mean, Lee is completely self-taught, you know. He plays what Lee Ronaldo plays, you know. But I love playing with a guy. I mean, it's just so creative and so artistically, you know.
Wow. Yeah. So, like, so you feel like you can recognize, because obviously, like, you've probably spent more time than most people, you know, really researching music and really, you know, like, spending the time. Like, it's like you could hang and you could talk with, like, the elites of just, like, music, but, like, it's like, I think that's beautiful that you're able to recognize, you know, at its core what, like it's like, is it kind of almost fun work and, like, liberating working with musicians who are just, like, reject or just like, yeah, I'm just having fun, I like the sound.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think there is a strength in there, and I think I sometimes mentioned that I think, honestly, for me, that's part of what makes rock music so interesting, is that you can have a band where, I don't know, your keyboarder comes from conservatory and plays a great Chopin, yeah, and the guitar player is all self-taught, and cannot play faster than equals quarter equals 100 or so, but has great ideas. And then that clash of these, Velvet Underground, it's Lou Reed and John Cale, a kind of classical wunderkind who I think did his first solo piano thing at Carnegie Hall at 14 or 15 or something like that. And then Lou Reed, who's basically self-taught, can't tell a C from a C sharp, but really, just has all these ideas.
And that's so, that's so difficult because it's so hard to, you can't really learn that sort of thing, You can discover it within yourself, but learning to, be creative is something that, really can't be taught,
And, actually, what I did? I mean, for me personally, it was always important to have a good traditional technique. But I realized very quickly that's something I need for myself. Like, not everyone necessarily needs that. There's a lot of people out there I really like and admire who have no classical technique, no traditional technique at all, but they're Captain Beefheart, fantastic. I mean, probably a more traditional technique would have killed his music,
Totally.
So, let's just really celebrate that we have both of those things there.
Yeah, exactly. Which, I think that tapping back into that, as a current music student, I'm blessed that I had time to, study like music theory, learn like solfege and all of that sort of stuff. But, I think that especially this year, I've gotten to a point where I've recognized that, like, I need to, like, okay, like, I've learned this information, but, like, it hasn't, like, directed me into that many places, So kind of like having, like, I don't know, like that, like, Velvet Underground, like, like that John Cale sort of, like, very, like, he knows what he's talking about versus that Lou Reed, that fun, that spirit, that energy behind, like, what you're doing. Like, I feel like that is what is more, like, attracting me. Like, that is what is just, like, what music is about, Because at the end of the day, music is fun. And it should be fun to listen to.
Yeah, but I really think that's important, and I'm glad that at CalArts that's actually possible. But when I was studying classical, luckily I was always improvising. I was always playing with some bands, and actually what I really did, I practiced. It sounds stupid and strange, but I practiced letting loose. So next to like practicing very detailed, precise technique, I also practice just to go for it and forget about it.
Yeah.
And especially I think if you practice a lot of this really traditional technique and precision, which, as I said, I needed it for myself, it's also important always practicing to just be able to just forget about it.
Yeah.
And I think I know some friends who they cannot listen to a song without automatically analyzing the chord sequence. Yeah,
it's a nightmare,
and they can't shut that off. And that's something I trained from very early on. I have two minds, and there's a switch. I listen to music as everyone listens. And then I turn the switch and I listen to music analytically. Okay, what's the bass doing? How does it work with the guitar? How's the drummer playing? But that's a switch, and I practiced that. I learned that, on purpose, because I didn't want to lose that ability just to listen without having to do an analysis as a musician.
Yeah. Damn, that is so important. That is. Just looking at, just hearing something and being like, I like that. Not like, I like that because it's like like a ton of fifths moving downwards, but being like, I just like the sound of this. That's where,
exactly.
Greatness
then you
comes
can turn on your intellectual mind and say, oh, why do I like the sound? What are they doing? Yeah. Oh, they use fifths, not third. I don't like the thirds, but I like the fifths here, and being able to switch back and forth, I think that's really something we should train.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
You.
This has been so cool. I feel so happy. This went so well. So thank you so much. To Ulrich for doing this.
Thanks, everyone.
He's the man. JoeDock Hour.